everyone equally. And we know that it had a particular effect on children and young people, with the closure of schools and colleges, learning lost, and significant effects on mental health and well-being. This impact has been felt right the way across the globe, undertaken here in Kenya to engage with and achieve Sustainable Development Goal 4 on access to quality education for all. I think this year of youth provides all of us with a great opportunity, but also a responsibility to engage more fully with young people. In November 2022, the CPA held a very successful Commonwealth Youth Parliament in Trinidad. We're now exploring further activities for this year to support you in your outreach and engagement with young people, as well as supporting young members of Parliament throughout the Commonwealth. Inclusiveness is an important part of the Commonwealth Charter. The CPA seeks to reflect this in our work, most notably with our three amazing networks: CWP, Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, our Small Branches Network, and the Commonwealth Parliamentarians with Disabilities Network. The CWP is now chaired by the Honourable Zainab Gimba from Nigeria. Its role is to provide a voice for women within the CPA and to promote increased representation of women in Parliament throughout the Commonwealth. I know that in your election last year, we saw a welcome increase in the number of women elected, but I know also, as in most other countries in the Commonwealth, there is still a long way to go towards the ultimate goal of equal representation for women and men. And we are addressing this within the CPA itself, with a set of reforms agreed at our General Assembly last year, designed to increase the numbers of women represented on our Executive Committee and at our General Assembly. One tool to do this is to promote more gender-sensitive parliaments. Gender audits are one of the tools for doing that, and we are exploring how we can support our members to undertake gender audits in the future, and I would welcome a discussion with the Parliament of Kenya about doing one here. Our newest CPA network is the Commonwealth Parliamentarians with Disabilities, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the former Member of Parliament from Kenya, Honourable Denisa Gatti, who served as chair of this network until your election last year. Her successor as chair is the Honourable Laura Kanushu from Uganda. Persons with disabilities continue to face barriers of discrimination, exclusion and prejudice throughout the world, and our Disabilities Network seeks to provide practical support to persons with disabilities and to parliaments to enable full and equal participation. The CPA is divided into 9 regions, and those regions play a critical role in the delivery of our work. Africa Region Secretariat is based in Tanzania and works very closely with branches across Africa and very closely with us in the CPA Secretariat. I am immensely grateful to them and to the Africa Regional Exco for all the work that they do to ensure that the CPA has impact throughout this region. I've now been in this role for 2.5 years, and it is a privilege to serve as the CPA Secretary General. I find that I am learning all the time about the work of parliaments across the Commonwealth on crucial issues, from climate change to gender equality, from technology and innovation to the Sustainable Development Goals. We also know that there are wide disparities in the situations faced by different Commonwealth countries, but also many challenges in common. The Right Honourable Speaker and I were in Australia earlier this month for the Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers of the Commonwealth. There was a lot of discussion there about security. Security for individual parliamentarians, security for parliaments as institutions. The conference also shared experiences of how different parliaments had adapted to the COVID pandemic.
And I am committed to working with your Speaker and with speakers and presiding officers throughout the Commonwealth through CSPOC to build upon these important areas of discussion. Strong, independent parliaments are vital, but we know that the existence of these parliaments cannot be taken for granted. Legislation, oversight, holding the executive to account are crucial functions of the legislature. But another is to make sure that you are connected with citizens and civil society. The Commonwealth has a plethora of organisations and networks with whom we work. In the same way that a healthy, diverse, global civil society is good for the Commonwealth, so too is a strong civil society important for the work of individual Commonwealth countries. And I will talk more about this in the session on Wednesday on outreach and education. In conclusion, as we mark the 10th anniversary of the Commonwealth Charter, let us take this opportunity to reflect on some of the commitments contained within it. I am personally by nature an optimist, but even the greatest optimist would have to admit that the scale of challenges facing the Commonwealth and the wider world at the moment is daunting. Whether we're talking about the climate crisis, the impact of armed conflict, food insecurity, authoritarianism, inequality, poverty, the violations of human rights, and the precarious state of our world economy, these challenges are large. Yet it is in such difficult times that we most need and most benefit from strong networks and organisations so that we can both support and learn from each other. For the 21st century, the Commonwealth and the CPA have a great opportunity to make a real and positive difference. The Commonwealth is not just a secretariat based in Marlborough House in London supporting 56 governments. It is a complex set of networks and organisations. Similarly, the CPA is not just a network of 20 staff there to support 18,000 legislators and parliamentary staff. It is there for the people of the Commonwealth, as you are here for the people of Kenya. Above all, the Commonwealth needs to be relevant and needs to speak to its citizens. 2.4 billion citizens, most of them aged under 30. I look forward to our discussion this week, but I also look forward to working with all of you in the months and years ahead as you seek to address these challenges with Kenya and as Kenya continues to play its part regionally and internationally in supporting good governance and sustainable development. Thank you very much and have a successful week.
Thank you very much, Honourable Twigg, for that very informative presentation. I think we will now open up to members, to make any comments or to ask you questions. But I wish to encourage members, especially those the young members, the new members, that the CPA has a wealth of opportunities and linkages and networks that you can benefit from, not only as a parliamentarian, but also going forward in your future. I know that I've had the opportunity to grow under the Commonwealth Law Reporters Association, the International Women Judges Association, the Commonwealth arm of the Law Society, and therefore it's amazing networks that I've made over the years, and I encourage members that, and they also have a lot of short-term trainings that are amazing, so do ensure that you look up their websites, get in touch with them, and use your committees. And I know that we shall try and encourage that under the liaison committee, because Parliament and Kenya and many other professional bodies have many professional bodies around the Commonwealth theme. So I think the mics, Sergeant at Arms, we need the mics out there. Okay, I can see a hand at the far corner. There, you may stand up, sir. Honorable member, so that they can see you. Another person, I'll take 3. I can see your hand at the back there. Who else? I think I have those 2 to start with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is John Kagushia, member for Mukurweini, and I appreciate the presentations we have had so far. I particularly have taken a lot of notes on Honorable Twig's presentation. And yes, I agree, there seems to be quite a lot to learn from the CPA, and especially we, the first timers, we will take time to understand how we can be able to learn as much as possible. I will also want to make a remark on some of the daunting challenges that Mr. Twig, you have mentioned. You have mentioned challenges like the COVID-19, you have mentioned challenges like the authoritarianism, but you have also missed on negative opposition politics in some of the sub-Saharan countries. Probably that's also one thing that you also need to note there in the many challenges that are facing the Commonwealth countries. Of course, you know that where you have good governance, you also need to have a good, well-structured opposition politics, which is also meaningful, that is adding value, rather than intimidating and destructive to any nation. Please add that one as a big challenge in a sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you very much.
There's a member at the... Stand up so that they can see you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. And Honorable Twig, thank you for your presentation. I want to draw you to the Kenyan parliamentary structure and the unique program that is known as the Constituency, the National Government Constituency Development Fund. And in your presentation, you have touched about the issue of separation of powers. Now, we have seen that there is, we've had a court case that has ended up at the Supreme Court, and the issue of separation of powers has been cited as one of the reasons why there has been opposition to the Constituency Development Fund. What would be your take in terms of the uniqueness of the Kenyan Parliament in terms of the development of the constituencies and the separation of powers?
Thank you both very much for those questions, both of which are very challenging questions, and I suspect maybe ones on which there are different views in the hall, but let me do my best to respond, and if I may, I'll respond to them in the reverse order. So let me start with the question about the constituency development funds. I remember the first time that I came here when I was still a member in the United Kingdom, and we were told about these constituency development funds, very different to anything that I was used to as a former member in the United Kingdom. I think there may be other countries that have similar sorts of programs. I don't think as the CPA we would take a view, we would say that's something for you to decide in your own country. I think if you're going to have those sorts of systems, it's obviously important that there is openness, transparency and consistency between constituencies, that access to those funds should be based on a set of criteria, I imagine within which social and economic need would be high on the list and available on a fair and equal basis between constituencies represented by government members and opposition members. I'll be very interested perhaps to pick up the issue informally today or during the week to hear a little bit more about the basis for any legal change and to learn more about how those constituency development funds are used here in Kenya. On the first question, and this strikes, I think, at a really important issue. which is about the conduct of politics and how we do politics. Because one of the things about a democracy is that you want to see open, healthy debate. Differences of opinion should be able to be aired, but it is also important that each of us has a sense of responsibility. I mentioned that when your speaker and I were in Australia, there was a lot of discussion about security. And one of the issues that has arisen is in the context of the personal security of members of parliament, including, in extreme cases, violence against members of parliament. As you may know, in the United Kingdom, 2 members of parliament have been murdered in the last 10 years, and this is a live issue in other jurisdictions. I was recently in Sri Lanka, where there have been attacks on parliamentarians there. So there is an important balance to be struck in our public discourse between the importance, the crucial importance of free speech, debate, assembly, protest, but also conducting ourselves in a way that is respectful. And I think, to come to your question, that applies within the context of the chambers of Parliament, where healthy debate is crucial, but there is never, in my opinion, a need for that to become highly personalised and hostile. But the thing that has changed a lot since I first became a member more than 25 years ago is, of course, the rise of social media. And social media has given some great opportunities for parliaments, for parliamentarians to engage with their citizens and in particular their constituents, but also has, as we know, been used by some to promote hostility against parliamentarians and indeed against others. And I would simply make a plea that we work together insofar as we can on a cross-party basis to try to encourage debate and discussion and discourse, whether in the chamber or in the wider public sphere, that is respectful rather than resorting to personality and personal insults, because there are those who want to undermine democracy. There are those who don't really favour a proper system of democracy, and I think we have a responsibility to protect democracy, and free speech is part of that, but so too is showing respect for one another.
Thank you very much. I think we're only taking one more, and then we'll move to the next topic. Honorable KJ, member for Dagoretti, and then we can move to the next topic. Okay, and I've seen Honorable Jane Kihara. Just the two of you, and then we can move to the next topic.
First of all, I'd like to say that this has been a very enlightening presentation. We do appreciate the presentation. My question is in relation to what you're learning from other jurisdictions within the Commonwealth. In the time that we are in, we as legislators are finding ourselves playing catch-up when we are legislating, especially in spheres of emerging technologies and emerging industries.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, from where you're sitting as CPA, what are you seeing the future for legislation and legislators in a new world that probably is moving faster than how democracies imagined that parliaments would be working in solving the problems of the people? And when the problems are not solved in parliament, people are finding other alternatives of agitating. So we play the key roles of representation, legislation, and oversight. However, the technologies and emerging industries are moving so fast that people cannot wait for the bureaucracy of lawmaking, the bureaucracy and red tape of waiting for a bill for half a year or probably a whole year for it to be enacted as law. What are your learnings in the search and spin around the jurisdiction of the CPA? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Mine is on gender. I don't know whether you have programs to empower women so that they are confident to vie for positions. Those programs are important. As it is now, you have it in the Constitution of not more than 2/3, which we have tried to pass in Parliament. It has not come through. So as an organization, CPA, what are you doing about that? Again, do you have programs for political parties? So to ensure that we have women representation in Commonwealth parliaments. Because here it has been a problem, and if there is no deliberate effort, then we are going to remain under. Fortunately, I was elected in a constituency, first time in 2003. And I remember when I went for a trip with the then liaison committee. And because we didn't have a woman, a single woman, as a committee chair, the deputy speaker at that time picked a few of us because there are some parliaments that they would not have been allowed to go without women.
Yeah.
So what is it that you're doing for women representation?
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Look, can I thank both of you for those very important questions. And I mentioned our strategic plan. Our strategic plan has 6 cross-cutting themes. One is technology and innovation, and another is gender. And so it's absolutely in line with our priorities. Let me take the 2 questions in the order in which they were asked. So on technology and innovation, I mentioned the impact of COVID. And I think you're absolutely right to characterise that parliaments and democracy, by their nature, move more slowly than the technology and the innovation does, and it can sometimes take time to catch up. Nevertheless, what was striking was when we had to, we did. And when the COVID pandemic hit, and in most countries there were lockdowns and restrictions on movement and the growth of remote and hybrid working, the technology was used, I think, very, very effectively, including here in Kenya, to enable that to happen. So one of the debates now is how much of what we learned from that period can still apply now that we don't need to have those measures in place. And I know from my engagement with parliaments across the Commonwealth, including the discussions in Canberra at the meeting that I mentioned, there are very, very different views. So in some places, they've chosen to go back largely to everything being in person. Elsewhere, they've retained hybrid and remote sessions. I would say that I used to chair a committee. Actually, if you want to take evidence in a committee from an international expert who's in another country, or from a community in your own country that's a long way away from the capital, then actually technology enables you to be much more inclusive, enables more voices to be heard, and actually enables you to save some money as well, because you're not having to transport people around. So we're looking at all the ways that we can respond. We held an event during COVID on the 4th Industrial Revolution, addressing all of the questions that you've covered and more. And we're looking to have a second 4th Industrial Revolution conference in the coming year or so. And we're looking to have that in person, or hopefully hybrid this time, rather than simply doing it online. You're absolutely right that this is something that we've got to get a handle on, otherwise Parliament will lose some of their influence over these important matters, and perhaps we can discuss it a bit more during the course of the day and the rest of the week. Let me address the question, thank you, on gender, because as I mentioned in my speech, this really is something that the CPA feels very strongly about. It's why we have the CWP network, the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Network, and we know that the Commonwealth has within it some of the worst and some of the best. So the Commonwealth has, I'm afraid to say, some parliaments where there are no women at all in their parliament, and the Commonwealth has Rwanda, where over 60% are women, South Africa, where I think it's well over 40%, New Zealand, which has just hit 50%. So we need all the time to be learning from each other. And yes, in answer to your first question, we do have a number of tools that we've developed to support women parliamentarians to do their work. We have a toolkit on gender sensitising parliaments that is available both in a physical form but also online. And we run a series of events with our CWP. So, for example, in December, we had a CWP workshop. It was in Canberra, Australia, and it was about increasing women's representation, but also empowering men to be champions of women's equality. And we held it in that region because some of the Pacific parliaments have particularly low levels of women's representation. We're all the time looking to do more of those sorts of activities. On your final point about political parties, we don't, as the CPA, work with political parties. That's never been the way that the CPA has worked. However, the question you've asked is one that gets asked quite a lot, both in terms of women's representation and other issues. And I think we need just to consider this again as to whether there is scope, at least for the CPA, to provide some support to candidates. Speaking from my personal experience, I was a Member of Parliament from the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, and in the Labour Party, positive discrimination was used. It was very, very controversial, but half the winnable constituencies, it was said that only women could apply for those constituencies, and that continued for a long period, such that now a majority of the Labour MPs in the United Kingdom are women, over 50%. And I think you are absolutely right to say that it can't just be left to parliaments. The political parties have to address questions of women's representation if we're going to get to 30%, let alone get to equality and have 50% of parliamentarians being women. And I hope there'll be opportunities during this week to have further conversations about how we work together to increase women's representation right the way across the Commonwealth. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for this opportunity to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Honourable Twigs. That was very informative. And if I may just inform you, Honourable Twigs, for the first time in the history of Kenya, we have a president who's a women's rights activist. And actually, we shall have the 2/3 gender rule being implemented, and women will be nominated midstream this year, hopefully. So we are still persuading members of parliament. We'll probably send them to the CPA. I'd like now, without further ado, to move on to the third topic, which is actually a second topic for today, opportunities and challenges for new and returning members, which will be done by the Honourable Kevin Andrews and the Honourable Sylvia Lucas. I'll briefly introduce both discussants and presenters. The Honourable Kevin Andrews served in the Australian Parliament from 1991 to 2022. During that period, he held a number of ministerial portfolios, including Minister of Defence, that's between the years 2014 and 2015, the Minister for Social Affairs between the year 2013 to 2014, Minister for Immigration and Citizenship in 2007, and the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, and Minister assisting the Prime Minister for the Public Service between the years 2003 and 2007, and the Minister for Aging in 2001 to 2003. He was the father of the House of 2016 and to 2022, and the father of the Parliament in 2019 to 2022. Honourable Andrews also served as a shadow minister in a number of portfolios. He chaired and served on a series of parliamentary committees, including the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Australia's family law system, foreign affairs, human rights, legal and constitutional affairs, and intelligence and security. Prior to his election to Parliament, Honourable Andrews was a barrister at law. Kevin is married to Margaret. They have 5 children and 7 grandchildren. And honourable members, I hope you noted that he was the Minister for Aging. We need a new ministry in Kenya. I would like to introduce also the distinguished lady, the Honourable Sylvia Elizabeth Lucas, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces in South Africa. That's equivalent of deputy speaker of the province assemblies, as they call it, I think. The Honorable Sylvia Elizabeth Lucas has an illustrious history of leadership in Northern Cape, the ANC and the ANC Women's League. She was born in April 22nd, 1964, grew up in Uppington in the Northern Cape. Sylvia Lucas is a tireless advocate of human rights, freedom and justice. She took part in Rosedale rent boycotts and was part of the delegation to the Transitional Council to ensure that the provision of the prepaid electricity to communities when they could not afford conventional electricity power. From 1995 to 2000, Lucas served as a councillor for the Car Highs local municipality in Uppington. It is during this phase in the struggle that the Honorable Lucas used her position as councillor to seek to transform the state in order to serve the objective of the thoroughgoing change. Honorable Lucas is a founding member of the Radio Riverside Community Radio in Uppington. She has served as an executive trustee of the Northern Cape Educare Trust and trustee member of the Ekipileng Trust, and served in the Free State and Northern Cape. In the year 2000, Honorable Lucas was elected to serve in Northern Cape Provincial Legislature, where she served on various standing committees of the legislature. Honorable Lucas was elected as Deputy General Secretary of the Association of Public Accounts Committee in 2004 to 2006, and from 2006 and 2009, Honorable Lucas served as a General Secretary of the Association of Public Accounts Committees. Honorable Sylvia Lucas served as the first female chairperson of ANC in the Seaard region from the year 2001 to 2004. In 2004, she was elected the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in the Northern Cape, and subsequently in 2007, Lucas was elected as the ANC, the Provincial ANC and ANC Women's League, where she served as the Provincial Working Committee. In 2009, Honorable Lucas was appointed as the MEC for the Environment and Nature Conservation in the Northern Cape. In May 2013, Honorable Lucas was elected and sworn in as Premier of the Northern Cape Province and was reappointed in 20th May 2014. From 2013 to 2017, Honorable Sylvia Lucas served as the ANC Provincial Treasurer. From 2017 to 2022, Lucas served as a National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. Lucas left office as Premier of the Northern Cape in May 2019 to become the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. Honorable Sylvia Lucas continues to represent Parliament at the following structures: 1, the Judicial Commission; 2, the Interparliamentary Union; 3, the Chair of the Rules Committee of the National Council of Provinces, and also as Chairperson of the South African Parliamentary Institute. She is also co-chair of the NCOP Program Committee and meeting member of the Speakers Forum. I'm thoroughly impressed, having studied in the University of Cape Town. I know how hard it is for a woman to make it where you've made. Congratulations. And now I'd like to invite both of you to speak.
Distinguished Deputy Speaker, distinguished members of the Kenyan Parliament, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Can I begin by thanking the Kenyan Parliament and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association for this opportunity to be with you this week. As I reflect on my political career, I note that one of the greatest benefits I had was the opportunity to attend discussions like this in many parts of the world, especially the informal discussions which occur on days like this, and to get to know people from other legislatures and other countries and be able to continue those discussions, whether by phone or mail or email or however, from time to time when issues arose. So I thank you for this opportunity for being with you today. May I begin with a caveat. Although we share many things in common, being Commonwealth nations, I also appreciate that there are differences in our constitutional and governing structures. I therefore offer my comments from an Australian perspective by which you may make a comparison, even if our experiences differ. My comments are therefore necessarily at a general level, but I hope that they provide some material for useful reflection, if not precise application. And indeed, what I have to say, I hope, is practical. It's the sort of thing which I wish I had been told when I was a new Member of Parliament when I was first elected in 1991. And I appreciate at the outset that many of you have had long experience in your national parliament, but others here are new, and I suppose my remarks are directed primarily to those who are new, but I hope that they are of value to those who have been in Parliament for some period of time. Having served in the Australian Parliament for 31 years, both in government and in opposition, both as a minister and a backbencher, I'm aware that there are real opportunities, no matter what role you have at any particular time within the Parliament. However, to quote Shakespeare, one of the things I've learnt is that nothing is achieved but by degree. My first outcome, therefore, is that achieving outcomes as a parliamentarian requires hard work. It requires perseverance and persistence and the ability to cooperate with other members of Parliament to achieve a desired outcome. There are many instrumental things which one needs to know and comprehend as a Member of Parliament. Understanding, for example, the Constitution and the powers which govern the way in which a legislature operates, and learning the standing orders so you can be effective as a Member of Parliament. I will leave those things aside in this presentation this morning and hope to concentrate on some other practical matters. There are some general practical matters which I always have tried to apply to my work. The first is that we have an expression in Australia that there are no votes in Canberra. Your equivalent would be there are no votes in Nairobi, unless of course your constituency is within Nairobi itself. In other words, people elect us as members of Parliament to represent our constituency. And my constituency was different to the constituencies of all the other members of the Australian Parliament. You are the representative of your constituency, and you should primarily be their voice in Nairobi, as I tried to be in Canberra, not Canberra's voice in my constituency, or to equate it, Nairobi's voice in your constituency. Of course, you have to convey, even to argue for the positions taken by your respective parties. But nonetheless, I believe that you are primarily a representative of your constituency and should try to recall that in your parliamentary life. Don't be enticed by the views of the media or others who do not necessarily share the views of the people that you represent. Secondly, and as a corollary of this, you need to know your electorate and the challenges that your constituents face. And electorates vary in a country the size of Kenya, just as in the country the size of Australia. People in different parts of the country from different backgrounds with different concerns have different problems for which you need to take to the National Parliament. And understanding them and always remembering them and keeping them top of mind, I believe, is important for any effective Member of Parliament. Thirdly, any parliamentary achievement requires patience and cooperation with other Members of Parliament. Let me give you an example from my own background. One of my motivations for standing for Parliament was to improve the range of support services for families, particularly families with children, which I believed in the early 1990s wasn't being attended to in the way in which it should. And although I advocated for a series of measures in my party, in Parliament and indeed in the public, I achieved very little other than some rhetorical support from my colleagues for many years. It was only when I became chairman of the relevant parliamentary committee was I able to convince the then minister to task us with an inquiry into these very issues which I was concerned about. And I then worked with colleagues across all parties on the parliamentary committee to produce a unanimous report. And I say that that's important in the Australian experience. If a committee cannot produce an agreed unanimous report, then it's a waste of time of all the members involved in that committee, because regardless of who is in government, at least in Australia, and I don't know if this is your experience here in Kenya, it's easy for a government to say, well, if the committee couldn't agree amongst themselves, then why should we do anything? And so working together in a cooperative manner from people who represent different parties and from different backgrounds, perhaps with different aspirations for what they want to achieve in Parliament, and coming to a unanimous, agreed, bipartisan position is very important for the work of the committee. The government of the time accepted the recommendations and implemented some of them, but of course, as governments want to do, not all of them. To finish my tale, it was only when I became the Minister for Social Services, 23 years after I was first elected, for which I went into Parliament to try and achieve some of these outcomes, was I able to implement the recommendations myself, because by that stage I was the Minister responsible for the implementation of those programs. My tale is this: perseverance and persistence and cooperating with other members of Parliament is the key to success, but it is often painstaking work which takes a long period of time. My fourth piece of advice is to become an expert in some policy area. As members of Parliament, we require a superficial knowledge of all issues. It's what our constituents expect when they ask us about an issue. And it could be whatever issue interests that particular constituent. And every issue which is within the realm of the national polity will be asked of you by a constituent from time to time, but none of us can pretend as members of Parliament to be experts in every area of policy at a national level. But it is useful, I believe, to have a detailed knowledge of one or two areas. I spent at least an hour a day when I was a Member of Parliament reading up on my chosen areas of expertise, so that if other members came to me and sought my advice, then I was confident that I was actually providing advice based on the latest information, the latest discussions which occurred in a particular area. I didn't necessarily become a minister in those areas, but the discipline of actually becoming an expert in an area of policy is one which I think is useful to all members of Parliament. And indeed, the longest-serving Prime Minister of Australia, Sir Robert Menzies, once said that if you get the policy right, if you get the policy correct, then the politics will follow. In other words, if you work out from a policy perspective what are the solutions for the challenges which are facing the country or a particular sector or a particular issue, then generally the politics, that is the support within the public, will follow if the policies are correct. My fifth point is to remember that people will not appreciate a solution to a problem unless they understand the problem itself first. I've often witnessed colleagues, and indeed governments from time to time, proposing solutions to problems or challenges that they've identified but the public didn't fully understand. It's important. Our role as members of Parliament is one of persuading, of being advocates for a particular cause. But it's important always to have identified what the problem is that we believe needs addressing before actually proposing the solutions. In my observation, when you simply propose solutions to a problem that hasn't fully been understood, well then those solutions will be rejected because people don't understand why it is that you're proposing what you mean to do. Beyond that, and I'll bring my remarks to a conclusion, and I look forward to an opportunity with informal discussions and the other presentations this week to say a couple of practical things about being a Member of Parliament, particularly for new members. The reality is that the life of a parliamentarian is demanding. People outside the parliamentary sphere do not necessarily understand the demands that you have as a Member of Parliament. It has become, as Stephen indicated earlier, with social media, with a 24-hour news cycle, it's become a 24/7 job. And that is demanding on your life, on your lifestyle, on your families, and indeed to counter that requires some personal discipline, which I believe is important if you wish to be effective. One thing I tried to discipline myself to do was to spend an hour a day just thinking. I asked my PA to mark a time in my diary aside. We had a special code so that the other members of staff didn't know exactly what it was. But I had this meeting each day, and that meeting was with myself. And the purpose of meeting with myself was simply to stop, to be still, to think, to reflect, to take some time out. And I believe that's important if you wish to be effective as a Member of Parliament. Secondly, I would say to new members, keep your friends. You may call your colleagues friends, they're really your associates. Your friends are the people who have been your friends before you entered Parliament, and hopefully they'll still be your friends when you finish in Parliament. But that's important for your own sanity and your own well-being. And take time out, especially for your family. It's very easy to say this constituency event, this demand from constituents is paramount. And if they keep adding up on your time over and over again, you'll end up neglecting your family and the people that really care for you and for whom you care yourself. Take that time out. Having that discipline is very important. As I said, informal networking at events like this is much more significant, I suspect, than what I have to say to you right now or will have to say in subsequent sessions. Make use of that. Make use of the opportunities to meet other people, to get to know them on a personal basis, and particularly opportunities like this to get to know people from other jurisdictions and other parts of the world that you can pick up a phone to or you can send an email to if you have an issue you want to raise in the future. With that, let me conclude. May I all wish you the greatest success as your term as Members of Parliament, whether it's your first term or subsequent terms serving the people of Kenya. May you continue to improve the welfare and the just government of the people of this nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning to all. Let me just continue to acknowledge the established protocol so that I don't leave anyone out. And I would really wish to extend my sincere appreciation for the invitation that was extended to me to participate in this important session. Honorable Deputy Speaker, when you read my profile, I realized that I'm very old. I will have to think of my retirement and become a permanent resource person to CPA. Thank you. Now, to build our constitutional democracies, particularly on the African continent, it is a challenge that rests with all of us as members. And as we are participating in this session for this week and for today, I think it is another bold step that we are taking in strengthening our parliamentary democracy. And by sharing ideas, by learning best practices from one another, and also by strengthening our cooperation so as to build stronger and more effective parliaments. The legislative sector can only succeed in its task if we establish stable social compacts between the three arms of state and also the different spheres of government in order to improve the life of our people. Now, I have been requested to share my perspectives on some of the key challenges that new and returning members might face. First of all, in the three spheres or in the three arms of state, Parliament's responsibility is oversight. And that is the one thing that we need to reflect on continuously. Particularly as new, and I see some young members being thrust into the legislative environment, a space which is governed by the provisions of the Constitution, by the established rules, by conventions and practices that govern the business of Parliament. It may be overwhelming. It may be one of the first challenges that you will face as a new member of Parliament. I started in legislature 2000, but I was a local...
لجرائم متعددة الصور ومختلفة الأنماط، بالإضافة إلى ملاحقة الخارجين عن القانون فيها، وهو أمر غير معتاد التعامل معهم في صور الجريمة التقليدية. ومن ثم لكي نتمكن من أداء رسالتنا وواجبنا في الحفاظ على الأمن والسلم في بلداننا، فلا بد من حماية قانونية قائمة على العلم والمعرفة والتعاون فيما بيننا. السيدات والسادة، تعلمون جميعا أن دول القارة الإفريقية سباقة في احترام مبادئ حقوق الإنسان، وعلى رأسها الحقوق الاقتصادية والاجتماعية والحق في التنمية وحق الشعوب في العيش في أمن وسلام. ولهذا كان لجمعية النواب العموم الأفارقة دور هام في تعزيز أواصر التعاون بين هيئات الادعاء العام في القارة الإفريقية بالصورة التي تؤدي أو تعطي النموذج الإيجابي والناجح لعمل الجمعية. ومنذ رئاسة النيابة العامة المصرية للجمعية سعت إلى تنظيم فعاليات تهدف إلى رفع كفاءة أعضاء النيابة وتبادل الخبرات فيما بينهم بالشراكة مع العديد من المنظمات الدولية مثل المنظمة الدولية للهجرة IOM ومكتب الأمم المتحدة المعني بالمخدرات الجريمة UNODC. ونظرا للأهمية البالغة لدور جمعية النواب العموم الأفارقة في إبراز الجهود لمكافحة الجريمة وملاحقة مرتكبيها، فإن الجمعية تمد جسور التعاون مع جميع التنظيمات الإقليمية النظيرة، سواء التي أنشئت بموجب اتفاقيات أو التي أنشئت بدونها، وذلك من أجل الاستفادة من تجاربها وتطوير عمل الجمعية ليكون أكثر فاعلية في مجال مكافحة الجريمة. فنحن بدأنا بالفعل في العام الماضي بالربط بين جمعية النواب العموم الأفارقة وجمعية النواب العموم العرب، وأصبح لدينا تجمعا إقليميا يتجاوز عدده 47 دولة بما يشكل أكثر من ربع الكرة الأرضية. ونسعى في الوقت الحالي في تطوير علاقتنا بوكالة اليوروجاست الأوروبية للاستفادة من تجاربها وإيجاد آلية لبحث وإنشاء آليات للتعاون فيما بيننا وبينها. وختاما، فإن النيابة العامة المصرية بصفتها رئاسة جمعية النواب العموم الأفارقة في الدورة الحالية تؤكد أن العمل الجاد نحو التطور والسعي لمعرفة كل ما هو جديد والبحث عن أفكار جديدة مبتكرة لربط هيئات الادعاء العام ببعضها هي على رأس أولوياتها منذ بداية دورة الرئاسة للجمعية. وفي النهاية لا يسعني إلا تجديد الشكر لدولة كينيا حكومة وشعبا على حسن التنظيم وكرم الضيافة، وعلى رأسها سعادة فخامة رئيس الجمهورية، وأيضا أتوجه بالشكر إلى صاحب المعالي النائب العام لما يتم بذله من جهد في تنظيم فعاليات المؤتمر السنوي، متمنيا للجميع دوام التوفيق، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Shukran. Your Excellency, we are about now to wind up. But before I call the next set of speakers, I just want to ask some of the people that I was not able to call up here to just recognize them, and maybe they can stand up. There is Justice Lesit, who is representing the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya. There is Madam Jedida, who is the Director General of the Witness Protection Agency. And we have the LSK President, who is also my President, Mr. Eric Theuri, present. Your Excellency, I will now call upon His Excellency Abdul Swamad Sharif Nasir, the Governor of Mombasa County, to come and say a few words.
Your Excellency, I'm the only person who Nurdin did not stand behind. Mine is to, one, thank you extremely. One of our key pillars as Mombasa is to ensure that we grow conference tourism, and such levels of conferences are truly welcomed. And secondly, Your Excellency, this particular conference is ideal to be in Mombasa. Mombasa is one of the few counties probably that has 3 levels of borders that can be porous, and that is people can be able to sip in through land, through sea, and through air as well. So this is something that we truly welcome. And thirdly, Your Excellency, there's something that we want to make it into law as a county bylaw. And I hope that those who are listening can be able to take us seriously. We want, and with your support, Your Excellency, we want whoever comes to Mombasa for these conferences, please make sure you finish all your money here in Mombasa. And as a county government, we want to assure the office of the DPP and the organizers, we have excellent venues that you can be able to visit, from the Kamba Handicraft, where you can get authentic carvings, to our sandy beaches, Mamangina Drive, to the Fort Jesus Historic and other historical places like the Old Town, and so many more. And with your permission, we'll be able to keep a concierge desk to be able to assist your guests to go to wherever it is that they wish to go in Mombasa with a lot of ease. So thank you very much, and karibuni Mombasa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now have the honor of inviting the Prime Cabinet Secretary of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, who will also take the opportunity to welcome His Excellency the President. Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, all the prosecutors present in this hall today, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'll be very brief. One of the things that I have learned is that you should never be on the wrong side of the prosecutors. So I will make sure that I'm very precise, lest we land into trouble. But let me just underscore that we have accompanied His Excellency the President here, and I can assure you that his presence is really a very strong and emphatic message that the rule of law is absolutely critical for a country to function effectively and for the region to function effectively. So with those few remarks, I will now invite His Excellency the President so that he can step forward and make his remarks. Thank you.
Please, let's take our seats. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Mombasa. On behalf of Governor Nasir and the government of Kenya, I take this opportunity to welcome you to Mombasa, this historic city. For those of you who have read a bit of history, this is where Vasco da Gama operated from. And he's taken quite a bit of history lessons in Kenya. So find your way around, you will find traces of Vasco da Gama and all the other people that came around for business, for trade, and eventually became part and parcel of our history. It is an honor for me to join you this morning at this very important gathering. And before I proceed, I take this opportunity to welcome you to Kenya. As you may have already discovered, it is a land of unparalleled natural splendor, magical attractions, and wonderful delights, and warm hospitality. We invite you to take advantage of this visit and savor the full range of magical Kenya and look forward to an experience that you can remember. I recognize Attorney Generals present in our meeting, Directors of Public Prosecutions, and Prosecutors General present in this conference, and I do not take your attendance for granted. Noting that this gathering is our continent's top professionals in law enforcement sector, is the 16th annual Africa Prosecutors Association Conference and annual general meeting. I commend the leadership and entire membership of the association for the consistency with which you have pursued the continuous and incremental development of the prosecutorial discipline. The evolution and growth of a Pan-African network of government legal professionals specialized in the domain of law enforcement is a highly encouraging development for many reasons. First, it signifies the entrenchment of a sustainable framework for the consistent enhancement of professional capacity in the areas of public prosecutions. Secondly, this framework holds great promise as a robust anchor for effective collaboration and the establishment and maintenance of effective cross-border networks based on mutual understanding among professionals in law enforcement. Thirdly, with the advent of globalization, the emergence of transnational criminal activities of great variety and complexity, relying on sophisticated technology and taking advantage of public and private sector infrastructures, demands the creation of commensurate law enforcement infrastructure capable of disrupting them and enforcing accountability. Pessimists frequently lament that Africa is vulnerable because it lags behind in effectively plugging into the opportunities brought about by globalization. The existence of a long-standing Pan-African network of specialized legal professionals, however, indicates that we have the potential to get ahead of the most daunting threats to law and order, regardless of sophistication or complexity. Your presence in this forum today is great news for Africa and also for Kenya. This event is highly welcome, and we are delighted and honored to host you. It is not lost on us that the privilege of hosting an event of this magnitude is an expression of confidence in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution here in Kenya. The honor of hosting a continental conference of this standing is not conferred casually or arbitrarily. Because of the transparent and accountable manner in which the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution operates, it is possible to observe the facts regarding its performance and achievements which elicited this tremendous peer endorsement. Since its establishment just over a decade ago, the ODPP has made impressive progress on a consistent basis with cumulatively radical impact on efficiency and efficacy of the law enforcement sector. Year after year, the ODPP has been able to report considerable improvement in the capacity to prepare files and prefer charges which can sustain high rates of prosecution and conviction. To do so, the ODPP deliberately enhanced the professional, technological, infrastructural, and organizational capacity to fulfill its constitutional mandate under Article 157 and 158 of the Constitution of Kenya and live up to its vision to be a just, fair, and responsive prosecution service. In order to fulfill its mission of providing its services impartially, effectively, and efficiently, the ODPP resolved to pursue the strategic path of specialization in the context of incrementally deepening organizational capacity. For this reason, it disaggregated its functions into 3 departments with 16 thematic areas. This facilitated dedicated focus on conventional as well as emerging criminal activity, promoting greater efficiency. As a result, the ODPP is now able to handle corruption and economic crimes, banking and financial crimes, land, environment, and related crimes, international and transnational crimes, as well as organized crime, in addition to a robust capacity to effectively prosecute offenses involving children. Also, gender-based violence, hate speech, and election-related issues, besides others against the persons and offenses against public order. The rate of success has dramatically improved and continues to rise, creating confidence within the rest of the law enforcement chain, as well as the public, that accountability for criminal offenses is a feasible public good. I'm also aware that the ODPP is highly modernized, professional, and future-looking organization able to effectively engage in a rapidly evolving law enforcement environment. Its responsiveness is enhanced through an active stakeholder engagement strategy. Beyond aspiring to achieve complete digitization, which is part of the overall government policy in digitizing all government services, the ODPP aims to fluently deploy artificial intelligence and blockchain technology to unlock crime mapping, incident, and partner forecasting capabilities. I have encouraged our Director of Public Prosecution to deploy all necessary capabilities, especially in the technology space, with the support of the whole of government, so that we can leapfrog our capabilities and capacities in managing crime, both at national and international level. The ODPP has demonstrated that through scrupulous adherence to its constitutional mandate, continuous pursuit of high professional standards, and strategic leveraging of technology, an institution can grow rapidly within a short period and attain global standards of excellence. I say this also knowing clearly that there has not been a smooth operation of the institution. There's been threats to it from politics and other elements. And when you speak about political goodwill or political will, it is a fundamental ingredient in ensuring that justice is delivered and the criminal justice system remains independent, remains professional, and remains focused on its mandate. I am aware, of course, of the challenges that this office has gone through in the past, and I have given my commitment and that of the government of Kenya to support the criminal justice system and to ensure that the criminal justice system is not weaponized for political reasons. Every citizen, irrespective of their political persuasion, is entitled to fair treatment by all public institutions. It is the least any citizen can expect from government. This broad account serves to demonstrate the steady improvement in the ODPP's role in increasing the effectiveness of law enforcement in Kenya. I am sure that a considerable portion of this impressive achievement is attributed to the fact that the ODPP fraternizes with Pan-African networks of ambitious, professional, effective, and forward-looking professionals determined to keep our territories and people safe and secure. And listening to those of you who have had an opportunity to speak in this conference, I am confident that your influence over our Office of the Deputy of the Director of Public Prosecution is evident. And I can see clearly that fraternizing with the kind of people, with the kind of experience that I see in this room has greatly improved our own performance of the Office of Director of Public Prosecution in Kenya. And I want to encourage you to continuously ensure that you share experience, you share knowledge, you build networks to support our continent. I am a great believer that this is the continent of the future. We have tremendous opportunity as a continent. We are a continent of great resources. We are a continent that has 65% of all uncultivated arable land in the world, and therefore we hold the future to not only feeding the world, but steamrolling the economy of the world into the future. In any case, a quarter of the people in the world will be living in this continent by 2050, and therefore it is necessary for us to continuously constitutionalize our politics and our governance, democratize our economies, and build sound institutions to protect our governance and to protect our economies. And in the middle of those institutions is the criminal justice system that you, the prosecutors, have the honor to preside over. I want to encourage you that the future of our continent, the future of the institutions of our continent is in your able hands to protect those institutions from criminal elements, from unnecessary and undue political influence, so that we can march into the future knowing very well that we are on sound footing of a constitutional governance framework in our continent, protected by a democratized economic framework that allows every citizen from the bottom up and ensuring that institutions are built strong enough to secure our collective future. From this point, in the evolution of our prosecutorial institutions, it is time to venture forth into the next frontier. The theme of this conference adequately anticipates the next sequence, demonstrating that our confidence in the power of the APA to challenge, inspire, and positively influence the trajectory of law enforcement throughout Africa is not misplaced. Strengthening coordination and cooperation towards effective cross-border prosecution of transnational organized crimes is highly welcome, timely, and appropriate theme for this conference. Due to its abundant resource of endowments, Africa continues to bear the brunt of transnational organized crimes which relentlessly threaten well-being, security, law and order in all parts of the world, and specifically in our continent. The impact of such threats to the rule of law pose social, political, and economic consequences to our nations and societies of magnitude that are too dire to contemplate. Transnational organized crimes is a lethal and direct threat to the aspirations and goals of Agenda 2063 towards the Africa we want. The rule of law is the foundation of the continent's renaissance and the guarantor of our aspirations to achieve shared prosperity for all our nations in our lifetime. I am very confident that this is achievable, and this conference, therefore, is a platform for professionals to deliberate on collaborative strategies of ensuring that there are no safe havens for criminals in Africa. It is my hope, therefore, that this conference will enable us collectively advance in developing a robust mechanism for detecting and disrupting radicalization of the youth, terrorism and violent crimes, illicit trafficking of arms, narcotics, minerals, flora and fauna, as well as their complementary financial crimes, including money laundering and the technological backbone of cybercrime. The prosecutor's dynamic jurisdiction is ever expanding. Humanity is presently besieged by the adverse effects of the triple planetary crisis, the human contribution to climate change and loss of diversity is posing an existential challenge to all life on Earth. Pollution is, of course, an exclusive human effect. The effort to protect the planet by pushing back on the drivers of the planetary crisis entails efforts to prevent deforestation and the decimation of rare species through poaching and illicit trade. This is the context in which Africa prosecutors must view crimes like poaching, illegal logging, and various configurations of trafficking. This is the urgency with which prosecutors must approach offenses related to pollution in all its manifestations. The stakes are high. Let me say the stakes are very high. I urge you to radically enhance your capacity to pursue and deliver environmental justice, and I commend you for including environmental crime as a transnational organized crime as a subject for your deliberations in this conference. Given that many of the challenges we face in Africa are shared global phenomena, I encourage the Africa Prosecutors Association to expand its collaborative network in order to plug into the framework of international cooperation and develop multilateral agency strategies for the prosecution of transnational organized crime. And I welcome the suggestions and also the offer by our development partners to work with us in ensuring that we build on the successes that already exist, the networks that already exist, the capacities that are in place for us to improve on our capacities locally and shared across the continent. This conference is therefore an opportune moment to strengthen regional, continental, and global frameworks of cooperation and the collaborative development of bilateral, regional, and multilateral strategies that enhance synergy and leverages the body of existing instruments to prevent and deter new and emerging crimes. Prosecutors are the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system. They are the most visible custodians of the rule of law and the guardians of public interest in the enforcement of accountability for criminal offenses. The expectations which fall on the prosecutor are heavy. To discharge them, prosecutors must enhance the credibility of the institution and overall legitimacy of law enforcement by fiercely asserting their independence, consistently demonstrating fairness, and being guided solely by the law. Let me repeat, guided solely by the law. I understand that prosecutors occasionally come under immense pressure for other political considerations. I want to encourage you that you have an opportunity as a prosecutor to make history, to build an institution that can transcend your own term in office by not succumbing to impunity, by not kowtowing to political convenience, but standing up for the institution that you represent and ensuring that prosecutions are independent in word and in deed. I say so without minimizing the working environment that many of you work under. Sometimes you have huge challenges. Sometimes you have huge and monumental customers, if I may say. And sometimes it is overbearing in an office. I was listening, for example, yesterday, and that's why I know the job of a prosecutor is difficult. I was listening yesterday to one of our politicians who was alleging that members of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission went to his house. And he's telling this story 5 months after the act. And he's volunteering this information laced with insinuations that the officials had gone there for something he has not disclosed. It begs the question, if it is true, what were these officials doing in your house at your invitation? Being a candidate, how did you end up inviting officials of an independent body to your house? It also begs the question, you had an opportunity to bring up this evidence of alleged bribery before 7 judges of the Supreme Court. You did not. You have instead chosen to take this big announcement to a political rally. I can see that the job of a prosecutor is really difficult if you have to deal with such. However, the government of Kenya remains committed to promoting public confidence in constitutionalism and the rule of law by respecting, defending, and upholding the independence of national institutions and eradicating undue influence and weaponizing tendencies. We are committed to promoting an ideal environment for the revival of prosecutorial zeal, guided by national values and principles of governance and underpinned by sound grasp of constitutional mandate. I therefore affirm that the government of Kenya will deliver on its commitment to allocate adequate resources to enable agencies throughout the governance, justice, law, and order sector, including the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, to perform their functions effectively and efficiently. We have not, and I have told the Director of Public Prosecution, we have not asked the Director of Public Prosecution's office to do any favor for us in return for funding their office. It is their right to discharge their mandate as an office, that a mandate given to them by the Constitution of Kenya. And we have no trade-offs, and we will have none. We want them to discharge their responsibility. We will do ours, and we must be founded on a firm, strong foundation of the rule of law. It's goes without saying that a commitment to prosecutorial zeal must always take full cognizance that we are a democratic society dedicated to the realization of the greatest extent of fundamental rights and freedoms. In this context, the measure of professionalism, integrity, and legitimacy is the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms of citizens as the principal end of law enforcement. I think let me repeat this for clarity. I have said the measure of professionalism, integrity, and legitimacy is the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms of citizens as the principal end of law enforcement. As I conclude, I commend the Africa Prosecutors Association for graciously designating Kenya to host this year's conference, and congratulate the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution for earning that great opportunity on behalf of Kenya. Being able to join you today has affirmed my optimism in the future of governance, the rule of law, justice, and law enforcement on our continent. And we look up to you as policymakers to stand up to any measure or any kind of impunity in our continent, so that we can harness the opportunity and the great momentum that we can to drive our continent into prosperity. The history of peace, security, and shared prosperity in Africa shall have a chapter dedicated to the role of prosecutors in faithfully stewarding sustainable development by safeguarding the integrity of our vital institutions. And maybe I am making this conference too serious. But if any one of you underestimated the seriousness of what you do, let me again say, the future of institutions of our continent will depend to a great extent on the performance of prosecutors in safeguarding the institutions of governance of our continent. I now declare the 16th Annual Africa Prosecutors Conference officially open, and wish you very fruitful deliberations. God bless you all. God bless Kenya, and God bless our great continent of Africa. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And with your permission, Your Excellency, we only have 2 items on the agenda before we wind up. The first one is just the playing of the national anthem as we finish. And the second one, with your permission, Your Excellency, would just like to request for a few photos. And because of the number, we have divided them into 4. So kindly, delegates, I'll request that we just follow as per the instructions. When it's time for us to take the photos, kindly let's use the rear door, and there'll be an officer to guide you where to stand. I shall read the photographs. But for now, we're going to have the Kenya Police Escort Band lead us in the national anthem. So let's all be upstanding for the playing of the national anthem. Then I shall guide you on the photos as we shall take them. The national anthem. Let us all remain standing as we allow His Excellency to retreat. And for the first photographs, kindly let's use the back entrance. We have the heads of delegations, the Attorney General, and